Carol Danvers has played many roles in her life. Hero, pilot, Avenger, and now deep space adventurer. Join Captain Marvel as she attempts to return an alien girl to her homeworld and defend the rights of aliens revolting against the Galactic Alliance. Welcome to another episode of the Geek History Lesson Book Club as we dive into Captain Marvel Volume 1, Higher, Further, Faster, More. Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I am Jason Binarylicious Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson. Welcome to your Mind University because you have stumbled onto the podcast where we take one character, construct, or space lady from popular culture and teach you everything you need to know about her in about an hour. But this week is different because we already talked about Carol Danvers ages ago.
Yep.
And we're rolling out our second ever book club episode.
Welcome back. It worked. The library asked us back. They want us to read more books. You want us to read more books. I love it. I love books, Ashley. I don't know if you know this about me.
Well, books are literally our whole reason for being here. Some people would think it's movies, but it's not. It's the books.
That is a fair point. Without paper, we would not be here.
Thanks, trees.
Yeah, so today we are doing our second installment of our book club, and we picked Captain Marvel Volume 1, Higher, Further, Faster, More. Why? Why, Ashley? Why?
Well, fun fact, it's actually Volume 2, but Marvel's really bad about renumbering. And
is it really?
Yes, Volume 1 is In Pursuit of Flight. That was the first Captain Marvel reboot.
I like that book.
That happened by Kelly Sue DeConnick under the Marvel Now imprint, and then they just arbitrarily decided that Volume 2 was going to be numbered Volume 1 when they did their first round of renumbering, and people got really mad about it, and then 5 years later they undid it, and now Captain Marvel suddenly has 300 issues, but that's fine. We're not going to talk about how they're competing with DC Comics. I suggested that we did this volume because Higher, Further, Faster, More is the first one that takes Carol into space. We know that the cosmic side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is very important and was going to be very influential on the movie, so we thought that this would be a great installment.
And speaking of a great installment, sometimes installments can be guests. And we have a very special guest here, the host of your biggest fangirl podcast. And also, I've heard, she said this was classified. She said, I could not say this in the air, but I'm going to say this in the air. She's secretly a member of Star Force. I'm looking across from her on the mic right now. She is wearing her Star Force uniform. She is a member of Star Force. She's in Marvel continuity. I'm talking about Victoria Mail. Welcome to Geek History Lesson, Victoria Mail.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. And I'm going to let the fact that you've revealed that I'm a Star Force member, I'm going to let it slide.
Okay,
because I'm that big of a fangirl of Geek History Lesson.
I do not want to die from energy disintegration. I really don't. Victoria, really quickly, tell our listeners a little bit about your podcast. Sure. And then also, I want to hear about your Carol Danvers bona fides.
Awesome. I'm not sure what bona fides means because I have not had enough coffee this morning. But I'm happy to talk about Your Biggest Fangirl first. So Your Biggest Fangirl is a podcast that I co-host and co-produce with a dear friend and fellow fangirl, Kristen Chavez. We take a look at fandom at large through the female perspective. So what we really try to do is celebrate females in fandom, empowers females in fandom, as well as draw from my experience living in La La Land and Kristen's experience working for a major university on the East Coast to empower fangirls to have their own awesome fan experiences. One of the things I like to say in my bio is I've met several celebrity crushes without being tackled by security, and I feel like it is my civic fangirl duty to pass those tips and tricks that I've learned from my successes and my failures on. We were lucky enough, we've had Ashley on twice to talk about Marvel.
Heck yeah.
It was so exciting, as well as Jason on to talk about DC Comics and being an ally in fandom, because just because we're fangirls and we talk sometimes about girly stuff, we want to take a look at fan culture and reduce shame in fan culture, so we hope that everyone can glean something from it.
And you can find this podcast on iTunes and all the various podcast places?
Yes, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, all the major podcatchers.
All right, so everybody out there listening, go check that podcast out. At least listen to our episodes, for God's sakes. But go listen to them all.
I also just want to say that we met Victoria because she sent a really, really nice message to my Facebook page and then was one of the only people who ever follows up with the prompt to send an email. And now we're real life friends. So really, just reach out to the people who you think are cool.
Oh, we should also reveal Victoria, you're a fan of Geek History Lesson, right?
Oh my gosh.
You listened to Geek History Lesson before we ever met you.
Most Saturdays and Sundays, you can find me running along Santa Monica Boulevard in Beverly Hills.
Oh, don't say that. Okay. Ignore that. She's just lying, everybody.
Okay, most weekend mornings, you can find me running somewhere at large in LA. Laughing along to Geek History Lesson and like talking back to you guys or doing like West Coast Avengers, dun dun dun.
Yeah,
I was
a long time.
Yes, I am a huge fan of Geek History Lesson. It has been such an important resource for me as I expand my experience in fandom. I've learned about so many amazing people through you guys, and so I was so nervous when I reached out to you for the first time, and it just makes me the happiest.
Well, no, you're cool. Like I love this because this is the Mind University. Showing their faces, holding their hands up and being like, professors, I have something to say. And you guys are all cool. So, Victoria, you're welcome. I love that we literally have the Mind University here. But we have more than just Victoria here. GHL intern Brago is in the room. He made a guest starring role as Goose at the 32-minute mark in the Marvel movie Captain Marvel. You might have seen that. If you don't get that that's a joke, then I'm sorry. But
some people actually think that's true.
When they see our second garage, they'll understand. But Brago is here. GHL intern Brago is here. Brago, what are your thoughts on Captain Marvel? That was great.
He's so wise.
I love his insight.
He's very profound.
All right. So real quick, let's move into the 10-cent origin of this volume. This, of course, collects issues 1 through 6 of Captain Marvel, technically Volume 2.
It is Volume 2.
Yeah, they're not really clear on their numbering. It's written by Kelly Sue DeConnick with the art by David Lopez. The color artist was Lee Luffridge. The letterer was VC's Joe Caramagna. And the cover art for all these volumes were done by David Lopez, assistant editor Devin Lewis, editor Sana Amanat. I'm terrible at names.
Sana is amazing. She is the reason we have Kamala Khan.
Oh, cool. And the senior editors, of course, were Stephen Wacker and Nick Lowe. I will always give kudos to Stephen Wacker because he is one of the geniuses behind the DC weekly event 52, as you know.
I also want to shout out David Lopez because the cover image of this where Carol has her fist up and she's like very excited. For me, that was the first image I ever saw of Carol as Captain Marvel, and it's always struck me as really gorgeous but also showing her strength, which I think is the delicate balance of this character.
All right, so the synopsis for this volume, of course, is one of Marvel's most beloved Avengers launches into her own ongoing series, even though she had one before.
It was a miniseries.
Carol Danvers has played many roles in her life: hero, pilot, Avenger, and now deep space adventurer, guest starring the Guardians of the Galaxy. All right, so we're going to do our meet cutes here. I know Ashley and I have already done our meet cutes for Captain Marvel, but I'd love to hear, Victoria, your meet cute for Carol Danvers. Where did you first encounter the character? Where did you first discover her? Do tell.
Sure. So I usually get into comics. I have this weird, some would say backwards way, because I usually discover them through film first. And then
all ways are good ways.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I fall in love with a character on screen, and then I dive deep into their history and what else I can find and binge about them. So I actually first discovered Carol when it was announced that Brie Larson was going to play her. I remember that image of her. I think she had red hair. I think it was at Comic-Con a couple years ago.
Yeah. And you could see everyone furiously Googling.
Yes. And I was one of them. I was one of the fierce Googlers, and she had the Captain Marvel hat. And I was like, oh, who is this? And it was really interesting because I Googled her and I didn't quite understand who she was, but she seemed super cool. And then as we got more and more hype for this movie, I told on Ashley's episode of Your Biggest Fangirl that they actually filmed the movie at the studio lot where I work. So I got to learn more and more about the character. And then this was such a gift for me to be on here and to be on the book club episode, because this is the first proper Captain Marvel comic I've ever read.
Ooh.
So I'm really thrilled that I get to share and kind of memorialize this experience.
Can I ask you a question about the filming? Did you ever run into anybody from the movie?
I may have breezed by Brie once.
Check out my most recent episode of Your Biggest Fangirl for the full story.
Yeah, it's episode 35.
Oh, I got to listen to that. Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
And then we saw some of the Kree spaceships, which is really cool.
Oh, nice. All right, so I think to be honest with you, I read this one, I think right after it came out. Because I had read In Pursuit of Flight before this, and I was intrigued by this. So I read this one very close to release. When did you read this, Ashley, for the first time?
I read this like 3 weeks ago when we decided that we were doing this for a book club, and I wanted to get ahead on our reading. I have not read a lot of Captain Marvel solo series. I've read more Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, because she makes my heart sing. But this was a volume that I always knew about. And again, it was because I thought the cover was so stunning.
Now, before we get into the book club main lesson, ladies, I have to announce to you, I don't know if you've known this, I've written a book.
What?
Yep. No words, only pictures. I mean, wait, that's... Strike that, reverse it. Strike that, reverse it. I'm selling this really good. Anyways, everybody out there, I don't know if you know, I have a book coming out. It's called Super Soldiers, A Salute to the Comic Book Heroes and Villains Who Fought for Their Countries. It hits stores on June 15th, and it's available for pre-order right now on Amazon and in bookstores everywhere. This is basically a book that looks at the intersection between war and pop culture to help us understand these questions. Each chapter in my book revisits military comic book characters, and I interject a lot of my own personal stories from my military career in there. This is a very personal book for me. This is a kind of a weird autobiographical book of my military career mixed with my love of comic books, and I think it's pretty rad. But you don't have to take my word for it. I asked a friend of mine, I gave him an advanced copy of the book. Benjamin Percy, the writer of Wolverine, Green Arrow, Teen Titans, Nightwing, and author of The Dark Net, said this. He said, "Jason Inman, I salute you. This is a heroic, inspiring, smartly researched, deeply personal, and historically relevant book that manages to be as thrilling as it is thoughtful." So everyone out there listening, if that quote excites you, I need the help of every student in the Mine University. Pre-orders are very important to the success of a book, and I want to climb the charts of the Kindle store. Right now, the book is 102 in the literary criticism / comics and graphic novels. Well, I want to be in the top 10 of that section. So help me get there. I'm going to keep updating counts. I know with your support, your power, we can get there. So let's show Amazon that service members and superheroes are important. So go to Amazon.com, pre-order my first nonfiction book called Super Soldiers. Hope you enjoy it. And now let's go back to the show. Let's finally talk about a book here.
A real book? A book with pictures and words?
Well,
actually, you wrote a real book.
I wrote a real book.
These are funny ones.
Captain Marvel. Okay, so let's get into the discussion of this book. Victoria, you said that this is your first Captain Marvel book. What I would love to hear from you is, basically, don't go too deep into the plot, but what were your general impressions of, diving into the first issue of this?
I think that the biggest thing that struck me
We're all professional podcasters.
We are. I know how to talk. What really struck me was how diplomatic it was. I think I was ready for space explosion, crazy, cool aliens. And this has that, but it also has this very grounded, interesting, dare I say, political plot to it, which is something I really love. I love, I'm all about a Padme Amidala moment. I also love a royal costume drama. So
I'm going to give you 5 points for a Padme Amidala reference.
I've already begged Tori to let me borrow her copy of the Padme Amidala book.
Yes. So that was something I totally loved about this volume, because we got to see Captain Marvel kick butt and got to see her use her powers, but we also had this really personal, human, and doesn't matter if they're not really of Earth or not, this very personal story about a people and refugees. And one of my aunts works for the United Nations, or she used to.
Wow.
Yes. I don't know how we're related. And, but it was really cool to see that kind of work portrayed here. And that was kind of the biggest takeaway. I also really, really love the dialogue and everyone's banter. And I thought the art was really interesting as well. So I read it twice, and I read it, I saw Captain Marvel earlier, and I read it after seeing Captain Marvel, the movie, which actually made me love it more second time around.
Well, I will say this, no spoilers to the movie, of course, even though it's out there and everybody can go see it, and everybody should go see it. There are a lot of tie-ins to the movie into this book.
Even just things like names, like Torfa is a really big setting in both the book and the movie, which is something that going into this volume wasn't necessarily obvious. I thought your point about the diplomacy was really, really fascinating, because they do really try to sell Carol as an airman and as a sometimes they say soldier, which Jason will point out is incorrect and drives me insane. I really like that.
Oh, wait, by the way, I forgot that. I forgot about this. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Please.
But I forgot. I should have said book club.
Oh yes, you should also say that in Jason Super Soldier's book there is a chapter on Captain Marvel.
Yes. I hate to say this. I'm not favorable to her.
Well, it's fine. You have interesting points.
She is a great superhero. She's not a good airman.
That's okay. She's not the only one that you come to that conclusion.
Oh, no. I actually knocked down quite a few of them.
But I think looking at her through the lens of a diplomat is really fascinating. So if Marvel Comics would like to hire us to write a Captain Marvel story, we have a great idea for a diplomacy arc.
Ooh. Well, I want to talk about the first issue here opens up and these are all alien names, so I'm going to say them all wrong. Manasinano Post. It's this planet Ursur 4.
Pretty sure you nailed it.
Yeah. So we start off in this weird marketplace. It kind of seems like kind of like a Middle Eastern marketplace. We're dropped right in the middle of this, and she loses Tick, and she's sort of with these alien supporting characters that are throughout this arc. Now, this came out. The Guardians movie was on the horizon if it wasn't already out at this point. I'm not exactly sure.
It was not out. This was right when... So remember they announced the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and then 2 seconds later they announced there was a Guardians of the Galaxy comic book, and people like me said, who the heck are the Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah.
This is the pre-movie Guardians team, which is why Star-Lord is still a capable leader.
Oh, well, no. My point was that what I was saying is that when we first meet her in this book, she walks out of this ship and she has her 4 other alien crony people.
Her squad.
Her squad, her team. I got a very Guardians of the Galaxy vibe from this. From this whole storyline, I kind of felt like they were trying to give, even though the Guardians...
Tick is even green, for goodness sake.
Well, yeah, even though the Guardians are in this storyline, I got a sense that they were trying to give Carol her own Guardians. What did you two think about that?
I don't know if they were necessarily going for a full Guardians vibe. I think for the time period, maybe Firefly is a better reference.
Oh, you're probably right, yeah.
And that would have been something that was still very much in the zeitgeist because that was sort of before Joss Whedon was half canceled. And that's one of the only dynamics that we know, right? Which is the Firefly team is also derivative of your Star Wars team, just to go all the way back to the Padme Amidala reference. She has a Chewie, she has a Leia here. But I think the Guardians analogy, because we know where that team goes, is really fascinating.
I have another observation I want to point out about this. In the very first part of this storyline, we're introduced to where Carol Danvers lives. I assume because most of the story is going to be set in space, so they were like, we want to show you who Carol Danvers is at home. She lives in the top of the Statue of Liberty.
I was in the same room as Jason when he read that, and he just went, she lives in the top of the Statue of Liberty.
I know.
It makes no sense. What do you think, Victoria?
Okay. I at first, when I read it the first time, because I was like, oh, she lives in Avengers Tower, as you do.
As you do, yeah.
As we all do.
Yeah, I feel everybody has a room in the Marvel Universe there.
Yes. But then, you know what, on second read, I was like, actually, and also because they open with the inscription from the Statue of Liberty, which is actually a really perfect kind of hint and parallel of what this story is going to be about. So I really liked, and I thought it was interesting, even though I'm from the New York metropolitan area, I'm like, there's no way you can live in the Statue of Liberty. I thought it was fun. It was interesting. And it's honestly something that, I don't know, as an American, I kind of forget about. So I kind of like that they brought it in, and for me, it didn't bother me as much because I think it tied in with the overarching theme of the movie. And you know what? It's fun. At the end of the day, we're here to fly around in space and rescue good guys, defeat the bad guys, and have a lot of fun. So live in the Statue of Liberty. Yeah. You do you, girl. I'm here for it.
I'll give you that. I will. That was a excellent point. I'm already very happy that we invited you in. We unlocked the door to our teacher's office and let you in here.
Trying not to squeak.
Maybe this is my writer brain. Wouldn't it make more sense for Captain America to live up there?
I have 2 thoughts. Okay. Yes, but the Statue of Liberty, I'm going to say this as a not yet American person, please support Aurora and theeagle.com, is that the Statue of Liberty is not only this bastion of American culture, she's a woman, and she is the only iconic female that dates all the way back to the birth of America, besides characters that people that we now know because Hamilton is so popular.
You mean the Statue of Liberty?
Yeah. Okay. But she's so iconographic as a female and an American female. So I think that if you're trying to imbue in us, if we don't know that much about Carol, if this is one of our first times meeting her, how important her American identity is and her patriotism, I think it's an interesting choice. Also, I just wonder, is this an OG X-Men movie reference? Because they fight on the top of the Statue of Liberty.
Anyways, I understand, for the subtext of the story, why Kelly Sue DeConnick made this choice. This is just one of those moments where, I'm living in the reality of the Marvel Universe, and I'm like, I don't know if they give it to Carol. I just don't think they would, Do
you think she's allowed to live up there, or do you think she's squatting?
I mean, if she's squatting, girl knows how to trick out a place.
Yeah, truly.
Also, Jason, who... We don't know if that's the only unit, that's the only building, or the only apartment in the Statue of Liberty.
That is a fair point.
Cap could have a crash pad. That's all I'm saying.
That is a fair point. Okay, so we move on into this story, and one of the parts that I love in this storyline, because I'm a big fan of this relationship. Let's talk about James Rhodey Rhodes and Carol Danvers.
So handsome. They draw him so handsome. Yes.
I'm going to give a minor spoiler for Carol Marvel. Carol Marvel.
Marvel.
I am so over the place.
Please only refer to me as that from now on.
Yeah. So I think that one of the missed opportunities of the movie was I was so expecting Rhodey, young Rhodey, to show up in the movie, because Carol Danvers, the movie takes place when you find out she's in the Air Force. It was 1989. He could have been a cadet, and I think it would have been such an interesting thing to see that she trained him. So anyways, anytime the comic books do Carol and Rhodey, I love it because they're both airmen. Mm-hmm. And I love the moment in here where he's like, yeah, go do your thing. Yes. I'm not going to stop you. Well, you got to go to space. You got to go to space. And actually it just made me be like, damn, Rhodey's too good for you, Carol.
But he's like, I'm not looking after your cat.
Yeah, no, I love that. No, I totally agree. I totally agree with your point. And as you told me it, I was like, oh my gosh, Jason, you're right. Mm-hmm. I would have loved to seen even if it was just a little Easter egg. I should give credit where credit is due. That is actually a theory that Ashley threw out about a month before the movie, and I thought it was genius. Well, both of you are just genius. That would have been an amazing little Easter egg to get. And then also, I did also love the Rhodey and Carol relationship. Mm-hmm. I didn't know how much I needed it until I saw it. And then, like you said, I love that he's this supportive, understanding, I don't know if they're using labels, boyfriend or significant other. I love that he was like, I'm not going to be the one who holds you back. I love a healthy relationship portrayed in comics. I know, because there's so many toxic ones, Scott and Jean. I think it was funny because they referenced her ex Frank a lot in their couple scenes together, and my brain just kept autocorrecting it to the Punisher. Oh, weird. Oh. Which, I know is incorrect. In no universe would have happened. They could not stand each other. I was just like, oh, John Bernthal, okay. Yeah. No, I feel like I don't think Frank would like Carol. Carol's such a dime piece, and Carol's so powerful, and so now I've become very protective of Carol, and I love that I don't honestly see her paired with that many people. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, Rhodey, you're good enough. You're no slouch. You're all right. I know that we shouldn't judge people like that, but I really I ship Carol and Rhodey now, and that is something that this book gave me. Well, let me ask you this, because it is something that I don't know if it's 100% clear. Do you think the reasoning for why Carol's suddenly I gotta go to space is clear? Because there are some moments of it, there are some beats of it where I felt that it was just, well, we got to get her to space. I feel like it is very editorial oversight. It is well, they told me she's going to space, so she's going to space. Yes. And we're doing this, and now we're in space. I think Kelly Sue does an adequate job. At least she bothers to give us a reason. Lesser writers would just start the volume and she would be in space. I do appreciate the time we spend on Earth, but kind of like in the movie, I like the Earth stuff better than the space stuff. And I don't think the space stuff is bad. I just, when she's, dare I say, grounded, I enjoy the story more. It's funny. I actually think I agree. I think the first issue is the best issue in this entire volume. And it made me be like, oh, no, Carol, you kind of seem kind of cool with all your interactions here with everybody on Earth. And then because there is kind of the subtext where once she goes into space, she kind of just keeps screwing up. Or she keeps sticking her head in things that aren't there. And it now eventually works out because that's how the main thrust of the story happens. But it does really seem like she makes more of a mess than anything she fixes. And perhaps it's also to your taste. I just don't. I don't care for cosmic stories as much as some other people do, except the Legion. I like my stories on Earth's. Yes, more grounded. I think why this cosmic story worked for me is because, again, there was this very personal, I keep saying human, even though everyone's an alien or a Kree fusion, personal story and very understandable stakes that for me kept it from getting too wild and crazy cosmic.
Yeah. Like Guardians books can get.
Well, let's talk about that. What did you guys feel about the Guardians? Because the next major moment is that Carol basically gets her ship blown up, and even though she can fly in space, but I get it, she wanted to bring her cat along, who's named Chewie.
Yeah,
who's named Chewie,
and her ship is named Harrison.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
because God forbid we don't make a Star Wars reference.
and so she quickly meets the Guardians. I actually love this Star-Lord costume in this book. I really do. I know this is from the original Brian Michael Bendis run that they did right before the movie came out.
This is the best Star-Lord. Fight me. This is the best Star-Lord.
So she goes on the Guardian ship. That's where she first meets Tick. And then Rocket has a fight with her Flurkin, which I guarantee you is going to happen in Avengers Endgame. He's going to make a Flurkin joke. It's going to happen.
I know, but that's minor spoilers for the Captain Marvel movie. If you haven't seen it, just hit your 30-second skip because it's not going to be long. The Flurkin joke is in the Captain Marvel movie, but it doesn't end the same way it ends in the book, which I thought was interesting.
Same. Yes, because I read this book before seeing Captain Marvel, and then I saw it, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I get what we're doing. I get it.
Yeah.
And then the thing happens in the movie, and I was like, that is different.
Yes. Which is cool. You can do things in adaptation, and it's all okay. Yay.
Yes. Yeah, because it worked. It worked narratively both ways.
Now, one of the main antagonists in this story is, of course, Peter Quill's father, who is
Jason.
It's Jason, but Jason,
it's Jason.
But the Spartax. Well, this is where, of course, in the comic books, Star-Lord's dad's alive. It's not Eco, the Living Planet, like the movie made it. What did you think about this? Now, this right here is where the book starts showing its age, and not maybe age, but.
This book is so ancient.
Well, at that time, when Marvel was publishing its books, this was the time where they were really trying to push the idea of Star-Lord's father. I think because they knew the movie was going to deal with it, or the movie's going to talk about it. So they set up Jason as Spartax as kind of this ass. And he shows up in Jonathan Hickman's Avengers run. He shows up in Guardians of the Galaxy. He shows up in a bunch of Marvel books around this time. And so when I came across this, maybe because I've read these other books, I was like, oh, it's one of these. Oh, it's the Jason. It's Jason as Spartax. Because to be honest with you, Jason as Spartax, not an interesting character, nor is he a good villain.
It just occurred to me that that's obviously a reference to Jason of Sparta.
Yeah.
And I literally have never thought about that before right now.
But what did you think about Jason? God, I hate saying
We're just going to call him Jason.
Yeah, what did you think? What did you think about Space Jason?
Space Jason. I totally get what you're saying. I did not love him. I don't think he was anything fresh or new. I also think you don't really get to see him that much. It's kind of like he's the shrouded figure on the hologram, which is kind of Star Wars-y.
Yeah.
And but I think he was important and he was effective as a villain. And where he put the clock on things and he gave us our conflict. And again, it was interesting because, again, we have this whole diplomacy issue. And I think also I hate talking about politics and religion in good company, but I think it's also kind of interesting because he's a different type of ruler. And so it does, even though he's not the most original, he's not the most funky fresh we've ever seen. We all know, if you guys know me, you know I'm all about a Loki or a Killmonger. But I think he was effective in this story, and he was this certain type of ruler and had this certain ideology that was necessary for Captain Marvel and Elena Dees.
Sure.
Our awesome leader of Torfa.
With her cool, lizard flair. I love that.
Love her character design. To bounce off of and have to reckon with. So at least he did what he was about. He was here to do.
What I actually think is more interesting about him is what he means narratively to Star-Lord, because you have Carol, who is trying to embrace her new identity and sort of leave her history behind. And Star-Lord is doing the same thing. They kind of have a parallel narrative. He's trying to leave his family behind and his legacy behind and carve out his place as the leader of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So I like him from that standpoint. But every time he shows up, I'm like, you could go away.
Yeah.
And that would be fine, because he is very much that mustache twirling villain.
Yes. But one of my favorite, it did give us one of my favorite moments when Tick wakes up on the ship because Captain Marvel finds her and then is like, I need to return this young girl home. And she goes at Star-Lord.
Yes.
He's Jason's son.
He's of Spartax or whatever that is.
And she's like, well, I thought and of course she doesn't really get anywhere with that initiative, but and she's like, but you have to understand, like, the Spartax are so bad, and if I had the king of Spartax's son, like, I would have had a bargaining chip. And I love Starlet's like, that wouldn't have worked for you. And even if that would have worked for you, like, even if you pulled this off, that still wouldn't have worked for you because my dad and I don't like each other. So I thought that was like a really fun moment for me that I really liked. I really loved the banter in this. I think the dialogue is one of the strongest that I've read, especially after seeing the movie in this. And I think the Guardians and Carol are a great match for each other.
Well, that brings into what is probably my favorite moment in this entire book, and it's a moment that is so Carol, and that is something that I think Kelly Sue DeConnick does get, because when you look at Carol's character, and I'm going to say this right out, Carol is a problematic character because she is very broken and she is very flawed, and she doesn't quite know how to be a leader, even though she always assumes the leadership role. She's like, give me that leadership role. Oh, I don't know how to do this. Or she's like, I'm going to fight this thing. I have no idea how to do this.
Yeah.
And so that sometimes she comes off as, to me, very arrogant. But there's a moment in this where after Tick, she captures Tick, and she basically yells at Tick and she says, there is no honor in what you've done. I have tolerated your behaving like a frightened child to this point because that is what you are, and I will not excuse a cowardly attack as if it was part of a code. Now, she yells this at Tick and makes Tick cry. And to me, what I love about that moment is because this is Carol that, for all her blustering, for all her arrogance, she does have a code, and she's like, I am going to hold to this code, and if you break this code, I am mad at you, and if you break this code, you're wrong, and this code is everything. And she holds to this code so hard, which is why I think she makes so many mistakes.
Right. I also like that moment too, not only because it's also humorous, and we also get to see and establish that Carol does have a tremendous amount of empathy, because she makes Tick cry, and then she's like, oh no, wait, oh, I overdid that, didn't I? Okay, so just stop crying. I am actually usually pretty good with kids.
I have two thoughts about this. I love this moment because my father was an officer in the military. That speech sounds exactly like what he would have said to me as a child, and I would have cried in response to it. So, like, that is my favorite moment, truly.
That's a pretty harsh thing to say to your child.
No, it's not.
Amateur hour.
It's not. But so that really resonated with me because I was like, that feels correct for like how an officer would comport themselves when dealing with a stubborn child. I also think it's interesting when we talk about like how Carol is like kind of a broken character because she's a lot like Captain Janeway in that respect, because Captain Janeway is another like first female character in a hugely important franchise played by a great actress
out in the cosmos,
who has a lot of like really weird parts of her character that are often contradictory and kind of make her like a difficult person. But when you sort of line up Carol's character traits, whether or not you love her as a character or you think she's fine or whatever, there's the same traits that we give to a lot of male characters, but because she is female, we like them less in her. And I just think that's interesting to examine or to put in your mind, because she's actually a lot like Tony Stark, but with more capable and with better training. But because she's a woman, we're like, but can't you be like a little bit nicer about it?
That's a fair point. All right, so I want to talk about the next section of this story. She goes to the planet Settler City on Tofra. And this is where the story really dives deep into the diplomacy. She meets the is it Elenides?
I think it's supposed to be Elianides because
Elianides.
It's a Latin spelling, right? Like or Greek, it's like an Ariadne, or like it's a very Ovid kind of character name. But who knows?
Yes. So I'm going to just say Elena. So Elena, this alien lizard creature. She gives Carol a tour of her garden, and they start really diving deep into diplomacy. And this is where Elena really narrows. She has this line of dialogue. She says, but you are here still because in your arrogance, you believe you have some unique understanding of the complex situation in which we find ourselves today. And my friends and ladies and gentlemen out there, again, no politics, but I have never read a better explanation of the United States than that line of dialogue.
I just want to say this as three white people doing this podcast.
Yes.
I found this a really interesting parallel for like colonization or even something like peacekeeping. Like Carol goes there with the best of intentions, but there is like you mentioned, Jason, a level of arrogance and assuming that she knows better than the people who live on this planet. And Elena, she's so cool. I'm so sorry about the name.
I know.
She does have a strong point of view, and even though she waffles, she flip-flops a couple times in this book, she is really trying her best. So what I admire about that is, like Carol, even where she's flawed, you don't dislike her.
No. And what I think is so effective about her, she instantly engenders respect. So I thought that was super cool.
Well, I wonder too, because I looked at her design and I thought she looked kind of like Yoda, and I wonder if that was well, she's kind of green, her face is kind of wide, she has a flat nose like Yoda, she sort of has kind of ears like but they're kind of pushed down. I kind of wonder if that was intentional. Like, I would love to see the script of this. Like, did Kelly Sue DeConnick be like, she looks Yoda-like except tall, or did David Lopez like intentionally draw her like Yoda to imbue those traits?
I like that the leader of this planet is an elder woman because we should respect old women. They raised the world. They know everything. And for Captain Marvel, which at the time I think was one of the only female-led books, it's a really powerful statement.
Now, Victoria, the next section of this book is basically an entire issue of debate, diplomacy, and she meets she meets her little Serenity crew, or Firefly crew, whatever you want to call it.
Squad.
Her squad, yes.
Basic.
Good brand.
Yes.
What did you think about this issue? Do you think it was a right move? What do you feel like? Because to me, it does sort of just stop the story. And it finally brings us back to where issue 1 had us.
I do. I totally see your point about it stopping the story, but I feel like we need to be caught up. And I know that using the parliamentary argument is a very overused trope, but I do think it was ultimately effective and well executed, because I did, at the end of reading that sequence, understand where everyone was coming from and truly understand what the issue is. What the issue is here. Like, because it's a poison planet, right?
Yeah.
And they have to make the decision if they just take the young and the healthy off of it, or everyone stays and goes through it together. And then you see Carol trying to be like, I can help. I do these cool things from my hand.
Podcast, famously a auditory medium. Victoria's doing amazing gestures to go along with our explanation.
I'm sorry, I'm Italian. I can't help it. But so I thought it was, at least, and I also thought it was drawn well. And that was something else I noticed in the first issue of this, when her and Tony are kind of saving a grandma from some muggers. It's visually interesting enough that even though we're slugging through this necessary exposition, it's visually dynamic that I'm okay with it. And then, yes, we meet the crew. I love the crew. I love Jackie. Obsessed.
She's the best. I would love to see her in a future movie.
Yes. And I also think going back to the Greekness of it all, because I'm also a huge mythology nerd, I love that she reminded me of a Medusa.
Yes, very much.
A Medusa character, but she was so cool, so smart, so capable, and so lovely. And like, her and Carol instantly get it on, and I need Jackie in a future Captain Marvel movie. But I loved meeting everyone. I think also because the dialogue was so strong that even though, yes, it is the slower sequence, it didn't bother me.
Well, let's jump straight to the end and let's talk about the conclusion of the storyline.
Well, because basically the following issues are just the fight.
It's a giant space battle mixed with a giant hologram standing over people of Space Jason. Space Jason, there we go. And to me, the giant hologram reminded me of some of those classic Star Trek TOS episodes where the gods were like so tall. They're like, look, Kirk, you will. I mean, he yells, he's like, I will kill you for this. I will kill you all for this. Carol basically beats the giant armada. And again, you can tell the movie took some inspiration from this. But I want to talk about, like, the battle's really cool. The resolution of this entire storyline, and I know this is a problem, yes, because it's an ongoing series. We don't get to read issue 7, but in this trade, it's issue 6. The resolution to this entire 6-issue storyline, 1 page.
Yes.
It is 1 page. And it's just Carol gets in her. To me, it is.
Comics are the perpetual second act.
Exactly, and that's problematic. I know we're only reading this volume, but for me, I was like, what?
I thought my Kindle hadn't downloaded the rest of it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was like, wait, what?
I can just imagine you being like, refresh. Yes,
Ashley.
But I do think like the giant battle is is interesting. It did kind of disappoint me a little bit because again we were like diplomacy, being honorable, but again I understand it's a comic book. It's a comic book, and we got to lead to a giant fight. And Carol's a space person, and we got to have her fight spaceships. Ashley, what did you think about the ending of this?
I mean, it's tough, right? Because it's ultimately like unsatisfying if we're looking at it as a single volume. I like that we get to end with Jackie because she is cool as hell and has a great girlfriend. And I like that again. Carol is leaving. And her final interaction is with another powerful woman who's going on to take on more of a leadership role in her society.
Like, and the music joke's cool.
The music joke is cute. Yes. You can definitely tell that they either got that prompt from or Guardians of the Galaxy took it from this story, because music is pretty important, which is weird for a written medium where you're like, I cannot hear the song. And if you don't know the song, you're just like, I guess it sounds like Mary Has a Little Lamb because that's the only rhyme that I can come up with in my brain.
Yes.
I can't make music in my brain. If you can, you're very lucky. I mean, it's fine. The ending is fine. The fight is really cool.
Yes.
And it's very dynamic, and it's some of the best art.
I mean, David Lopez's art, it's great throughout this entire volume.
Yeah. So
and the coloring is amazing as well.
I can forgive it, I guess, is where I'm coming down on it.
All right, let's go right into, we're changing up the order of the book club a little bit.
Boy.
We want to give the rating here. We asked you all last time in the book club with hashtag book club rating what to call the ratings of these book clubs. It was overwhelmingly Bragos. So these ratings will now be named after the GHL intern Kat Brago,
the real star.
He's somewhere in this room right now.
He might be inside the futon. We don't know.
We have no idea. But Victoria, we'd like you to go first as the guest. Please give us your overall thoughts on this, and then give a scale of 1 to 5 Bragos, 5 being the best Brago, 1 being the worst Brago.
Worst Brago.
What you would give Captain Marvel Volume 1, higher, further, faster, more.
Gotcha. Overall, I know Ashley, when she actually recommended this to Captain Marvel readers on our podcast, because it is a clean start, and I completely agree with that. I was impressed that it took on something, a storyline more elevated. I do totally see your issues about the resolution and the story kind of being formulaic and our conclusion of this volume being unsatisfying. And also, it took me 2 reads to really love this, and seeing a Captain Marvel movie that I wanted to love but didn't fully live up to my expectations or how I thought it should be executed. And the second reading made me love it more. So I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5 Bragos.
Is it the front 0.5 or the back 0.5?
What do you mean?
Like, which half of the cat is it?
The front, because he's a cute little face.
Yeah, I was confused by that as well. Ashley,
I'm a professional writer. You're welcome.
Ashley, how many Bragos would you give Captain Marvel Volume 1? That's actually Volume 2.
I think Captain Marvel Volume 1, Cum 2, I think the composite pieces are good. I think there's a lot of really good moments. I think you can actually see where the brilliance of this character is. You can see why she works in space. The things that I liked the best, though, were not sort of the main thrust of the story. They were things like her moments with Rhodey. They were Chewie out in space. They were how she learned how to work with Star-Lord and some of the supporting characters. It is a little confusing because it is technically Volume 2. So if you don't know who Carol is or you haven't seen the movie, it is not the cleanest of starts. But I think if you enjoyed the movie, I think it's a perfectly fine volume to pick up. I think you could do a lot worse as far as Carol. There's one where she gets pregnant and then goes to space and gets unpregnant in 70s. Cool. It's really bad.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm actually going to agree with Victoria, and I was trying to think of my rating before we went into this. I'm going to give it 3.5 Bragos. I think it's solid. I think if you enjoyed it, you would probably want to pick up the second volume so that you get more of a satisfactory conclusion. Jason Inman, how about you?
I think you nailed it. I think the pieces are better than the whole. Mm-hmm. Like the singular moments are so much stronger than the overall narrative of this. But I'm going to say this, and this is a realization I came to while listening to both you lovely ladies talk. I think if you go out to the theaters and see Captain Marvel, this is the perfect follow-up to it because it's tied so well into the movie. This is almost a better follow-up than Volume 1 of Captain Marvel, In Pursuit of Flight, which I think is the superior story of these two. That's the one where she first takes on the name of Captain Marvel. She goes back to World War II. She has a lot of adventures with other strong women. I love that volume. That volume is really strong. But I think if you've seen the movie, this is your better introduction because there's so many of the names, the crossovers. So that's actually my recommendation is go see the movie, then read this one.
Yeah.
I'm going to give this a 2.5 of Bragos.
How dare you disagree with us?
2.5. I did not enjoy it, and I also think I understand your point, Victoria, where you said like you should read it twice and you enjoyed it more the second time. But to me, if I have to read a book a second time to enjoy it, I think that's a failure of the book. So again, and again, this is interesting because we've only done 2 book club episodes, but this is not as positive as we were on Black, and that's the thing. Like, we are picking these titles because we think these are good little books to enjoy at the time, and
sometimes we haven't read them before we go in.
Right.
Can you imagine?
All right, so let's go into our Patreon questions. You guys, if you want your questions or comments read on the air, then you need to go over to patreon.com/Jawiin. That's Jawiin. Join at any level, even the $1 level, and you leave your comments on the post that we put up, and we'll read them here on the podcast. Actually, I have a question and comment for here from Nicholas Baldwin.
Okie dokie.
He says, Neal Feba here. I don't know what that means.
That's his, he left us a iTunes review, and that was his iTunes review username. I figured that out over the course of this episode.
Oh, thank you, Nicholas. He said, I recently read some Silver Age reprints of Captain Marvel, and I am struck by how very different these versions of her are. Goes with the times, I'm sure. Thoughts? Now, we've kind of talked about this in our Captain Marvel Geek History lesson. And this is a thing that's actually problematic for many Marvel female characters, that their characterization is all over the place.
Many female characters.
Oh, sure. I don't know. I would say Wonder Woman's pretty consistent.
Wonder Woman, there are outliers, but I think generally speaking, and we'll just talk about comics for right now, although you can look at Star Wars and see the same thing. Up until about the 80s, when in the 80s, the idea of like a businesswoman was really powerful with the big shoulder pads and the big hair. And we started to get into like, we're in like a post first wave feminist idea of what females are and what females in media are. And Captain Marvel, unfortunately, is very much representative of that. Like, she's an ingenue who literally gets, like, pregnant then unpregnant. She gets her powers ripped away from her and then given back to her. In the 90s, she wears a French cut bikini. Her boobs are hanging out all over the place. She's super annoying. And there are great Miss Marvel stories. In fact, on our top 5 Miss Marvel stories, we included, like, the death of Miss Marvel is really great. But it's not until Carol becomes Captain Marvel that we get this idea of like a powerful, dare I say, strong female lead. And I just think that's reflective of the time in the genre.
That they let her take the rank.
Yeah.
By the way, you telling this story of talking about the 80s and female and stuff like that, an image popped into my head.
Please.
And I think it's from very young Jason, not Space Jason, times in my childhood when I was reading comic books. And I can remember, because I used to buy all these old issues of Superman. Like, if I saw an issue of Superman, I just buy it because, like, I didn't have comic books around me.
I think none of us are surprised.
And I can remember reading this John Byrne issue of Superman from the 80s, and in the issue, somebody's doing, I can't remember the character, whether it's Clark or Lex Luthor or Jimmy, but they turn around and they hear and behind them is Lois in camo pants, and she just cocked a gun and she just goes, "What? I grew up on an army base." And I can remember me as a kid being like, "Oh damn, Lois is a badass.
That's a woman."
So I want to say that, like, I think that for me is the first time in my young life that I can be like, "Oh yeah, women are cool."
Yeah. Hope you write that down.
Excuse my swearing.
It's interesting because Nicholas Baldwin actually has a follow-up question that is also, the story of Torfa sounds a lot like Israel or other displaced peoples. Do you know of anything specific that the writers were pulling from? I did not do a ton of research into what Kelly Sue might have taken from inspiration at the time. I don't think that analogy is accidental, but I'm also not going to pretend that I know a ton about the Israeli conflict.
Victoria, this is a great question for you that I'd love to hear your thoughts on. Adam Warner asks, I would be very interested to hear your thoughts and predictions for how they might use her in Endgame to reverse the snap, or let's do this, what you might think her role would be in Endgame in general. Now, let's keep this spoiler-free.
Yes.
What do you think, how do you think she's going to mesh with the movie Avengers in Endgame?
That is a great question. And I honestly haven't had enough time to fully process. I've been very weird about Endgame because Infinity War broke my heart so hard. And I'm like, whatever. I'm not even thinking about it. Go Captain Marvel.
It's only like TBQH. 3.5 weeks away.
Yeah, it's like a month away, yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting. I think what I hope, because we had like this great moment in Infinity War where Scarlet Witch and Okay. Oh my God, what's her name? Oh my God, I'm thinking of the actress's name.
Okoye?
Yes. Okoye. And
I think she's Danae Guerrero.
yeah, Danae Guerrero. I know her
Yeah.
actor name. And Black Widow have this great like woman team up, and they take down Proxima Midnight and all of Thanos' forces. What I'm really excited to see about her is I think she's the only person after watching Captain Marvel who could actually handle going toe to toe with everyone's least favorite purple grape, Thanos. So I'm really excited. I hope, honestly, I am actually kind of excited for it because she is really kind of like snappy and has good banter. I want her to take a leadership role, and I want that to freak Tony out. And I want them to have like some great banter, but obviously everyone's going to rally around each other. I'm really excited to see how she interacts with Captain America as well.
Yes, yeah.
I
Because
have
there are
some
two
very specific
sides.
thoughts of that.
They're two sides of the same coin. And then also I remember when the week, or by week I mean the morning after I saw Infinity War, I was reading all the fan theories about what happens next. And something I'm really interested in, because someone made this amazing point, I think it was someone on screenrant.com, that Vormir, where the Soul Stone is a very deep cut. And it is in the Kree galaxy. So, yes. So I think there's something there with the Soul Stone. And I hope we honestly get to see some more of the Kree. And because that was something I felt gypped by in the movie. I wanted to see more of their society.
I'm really hoping that we get to see her and Rhodey have some kind of interaction. Please just let them talk
two
to
airmen,
each
yeah.
other. Like even if they wind up being buddies, even if they wind up not doing anything romantic, like I want to see some version of that relationship. Also, Jason has said this since Infinity War ended. Carol's the one who saves Tony, right? We all agree on that? Or she's going to be part of the way that Tony gets saved?
You would think.
Or her and Nebula are going to somehow
But again,
team
no spoilers for anything Captain Marvel. My thoughts were Captain Marvel and Captain America are not going to get along.
I don't think Black Widow's going to get along with her either.
I think
I just want women to band together.
Yeah.
I know, me too.
Well, I think because my thoughts is that Carol's going to show up and be like, I'm in charge. Because I'm the most powerful, and I'm Carol Danvers. And
I won't say that. That's a spoiler.
And I think everybody in the Avengers are going to be like, who are you? We don't know who you are. And I think it's going to be, they're going to give Captain America some moment where he like saves her or does something cool, and then I think she's going to back down and let him be the leader.
Can I just say one thing? And it just became like this headcanon I deeply need, and I'm probably not going to get. I really want Black Widow to just be like, game recognized game. This girl's for real. And then just like respect each other and kind of kick butt.
To be honest with you, that's a good idea. There is a chance, because Black Widow is a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, that she might have read the files on her and might know who she is.
That would be so cool. Like if Black Widow is the one who's like, no, she should be in charge.
Because remember, Black Widow knew who the Winter Soldier was too. So like, actually, I'd be fine with that. Yeah, if Black Widow's like, oh, Steve, you need to chill the heck F out. She could like incinerate the planet.
You know what? Steve, to his great credit, has followed women's leads before.
Yes.
Like Peggy's a really important figure in his life, so maybe he'll be cool about it.
Yeah,
he will eventually.
Yeah, I don't think that the conflict is going to come from the fact Steve's taking orders from a woman. I think it's going to be the conflict is they're
no idea who she is.
Well, and also they come from these similar backgrounds, the U.S. military, but they have very different approaches and viewpoints on life. That's where I think the crux of the conflict is, not because he is man and she is woman.
Yeah, well, Carol is fly in, blast it, and Steve's like, no, think. We need to think tactically about this. All right, I have a question here from... this is a thing of from Ken Taylor. Said, I remember reading this story when I was in college and started reading comics again. Reading it now, there's something about the art that made me enjoy it when I didn't before. And we said the art was great. For me, this is a great example of your taste changing over time.
I admire him sharing that thought because we often feel in fandom that like your opinions have to be set in stone, or we hold on to things that we believed right in the beginning. And I admire the maturity of being like, this is great now, and maybe I wasn't ready for it before.
Austin Main said, for me, the storyline very much felt like a bridge transitioning the book from an Earth-based superhero story to a politically charged space opera. My question,
just like Victoria said.
My question is, which storylines do you personally prefer when it comes to Captain Marvel? High-flying superheroics or galaxy-treading science fiction? Ooh, that's a tough question.
I think we kind of touched on that, or I did earlier, where I said I liked the stuff on Earth better.
I think so, too.
I think I was looking more for traditional superheroics, but again, like it doesn't mean I didn't enjoy the cosmic stuff.
Which one do you prefer, Victoria?
I feel like I need to read more of her Grounded to make a appropriate assessment. I did like the space. Again, as I said, I'm all about a space opera. Like I love Spider-Man because Spider-Man's my dad, but it's the whole thing. But my other favorite superhero, honestly, is Thor, because I love also the spaceness and like some politics. So I think I need to read more grounded Carol, but right now I'm perfectly satisfied by her space adventures.
Hunter Romans also left a comment that talking about female leads in their own books, which I think we kind of covered before. And the last question comes from Alan Pleskin, who says, I like the fact that at the end, Carol was willing to die for their freedom, and I think her position as a cosmic avenger suits her best. For the question, do you think Jason could become Space Jason, could become her primary villain? Or do you think there's another villain out there that is more perfect for her? I don't know. What do you think?
Ooh, interesting.
I mean, my first thoughts is, I think there's lots of other villains better than Jason. To be honest with you.
Yes, same.
All tea, all shade.
I mean, in my head, I can't think of how many times this character has faced off with Carol, and I don't know if they have or not. And this character has kind of been turned into a hero more recently. But to me, if you're just asking me, like, right off the top of my head, who's the perfect villain for Carol Danvers, it's Ronan the Accuser, who I hate what the movies have done to him.
But loves the comic book.
Jack Kirby and Stan Lee set up Ronan the Accuser as this amazing character with this like deep sense of honor. He's kind of like the Punisher, where he's like, he won't kill innocents, but if you have broken whatever his code is, he will destroy you and chase you throughout the galaxy, which to me is very similar to Carol's code. And they could create, and he's also a military man from the Kree. She's part Kree. There's a lot of interesting conflicts there.
So Steve Wacker or Sana, I hope you are listening to this right now. I think the best villain for Carol, Rogue got her powers by taking Carol's powers away. In the Silver Age. So to me, I think one of the most interesting and unexplored in the modern day aspects is her tie to the X-Men. I would give Madeline Pryor, Jean Grey's clone, the Phoenix powers and have Carol have to take her down.
Oh, interesting.
That's what I would do.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I like that. All right. So thank you so much for all your comments. Again, patreon.com/Jawiin. Even the $1 level. Everybody on our Patreon, you support our Patreon at any level, you get to comment. It's really cool. And you support the podcast. Keeps it free to you. It's time to announce our next book. And this is going to be in episode 253 that's going to actually air the week of April 30th. And I'm going to give this reveal to GHL intern Brago. Brago, what is our next book? Yes, Brago? That was actually Ashley, not Brago. We don't have... Ashley, why don't you go ahead and reveal our next book?
Our next book is Shazam! The Monster Society of Evil by Jeff Smith.
Yeah.
This is a Jason choice.
I love this book. I'm going to admit my bias already. Jeff Smith, if you don't know, the amazing artist of Bone, the writer-creator of Bone. This is sort of his mini-series that DC gave him a couple years ago. It's out of continuity. It's a one-shot.
You don't need to know anything.
You don't need to know anything about Shazam, and you get to read Shazam. So that'll be episode 253 in April 30th. So I think you're going to get about 3 to 4 weeks to read this one.
A little more time now that we're back into the swing of things.
Yeah, and remember, if you go to geekhistorylesson.com/book club, you can find the link to the next book right now. You can click it, go buy it on Amazon, and a little bit comes back to the Mind University. All right, we're heading out into this podcast, and we're going to go to the final section, the honor roll. Ashley, what's that?
The honor roll is where if you go over to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, whatever they're calling it now, and leave us 5 stars, we'll read whatever you say because we appreciate you bumping us up in the ratings. And our first comment comes from Isa Ruby. Pretty sure I nailed that. Best comic book podcast. Love you guys. Amazing discussions and an amazing podcast. Thank you for everything you do, all the work you put into researching the characters. I love the passion you have discussing these characters and stories. It's super interesting. Huge DC comic fan here. Do more DC episodes. Well, sorry, this is a Marvel episode.
Yeah, I love how that's... I'm sorry.
So welcome is a Ruby. Here is your key to the Teacher's Lounge. Jason, what do they get in the Teacher's Lounge?
Well, we'll find out once we have all the people.
Well, all right. This second one is J.D. Williamson 79. Are you Joshua Williamson, the comic book writer? They say really entertaining. Great show. Really addictive and fun. Perfect for nerds and geeks like me. Hosts play very well with each other. Love it. Aw, we love you too, J.D. Williamson. Welcome.
Yeah. All right. So you guys have been, like I said, given the key card to the Teacher's Lounge. Welcome inside. side. There are Post-it notes up on the wall from Professor Victoria Mail. She likes to draw doodles and hearts. I tell her to stop. She keeps covering the windows. We like the sunlight in the teacher's lounge, but don't mind them.
She's just drawing Loki over and over and over.
You know what she teaches? You know what she teaches?
What does she teach?
Archery.
Ooh, yes, I do.
All right, everybody out there, we want to give a big thank you to our guest, Victoria Mail. Victoria, please tell everybody where they can find you on social media, and please tell them if they love your thoughts. Please talk about your amazing podcast. Guys, you should go listen to this podcast immediately. Subscribe right after you get done listening to this podcast.
Okay, my heart's beating so fast because it's so amazing to hear that you guys enjoy Your Biggest Fangirl. You can find, again, we said Your Biggest Fangirl on all the major podcatchers. Our website is yourbiggestfangirl.com. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at YBFG Podcast. And of course, we're on Tumblr because we're two fangirls. And that's yourbiggestfangirl.tumblr.com.
And check out their blog posts because they have all kinds of really great tips like how to survive a Comic-Con. Thank you. Which I really could have used before my first one. Drink water.
Yes.
All right, so don't forget to subscribe to this podcast everywhere the podcasts are in your ear holes. Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, the coconut can somewhere in the Bahamas. It's on there. I guarantee you it's there if you listen hard enough.
I got skills.
Ashley, if they want to suggest future episodes of Geek History Lesson, where can they do that?
If you want to suggest future Geek History Lesson or future book club topics, you can go to geekhistorylesson.com, facebook.com/Geek History Lesson, or on Twitter at GHL Podcast. There's like 150 ways to contact us in all of those places. Please tweet the podcast account instead of our personal accounts because we might miss it.
That's right. And don't forget as well to follow us online at Jawiin, Jawiin, at Ashley V. Robinson for Ashley, and at GHL Podcast, of course, for the podcast. And don't forget to support Ashley's Kickstarter at AuroraandTheEagle.com. Go do it. It's live right now. Get yourself some comic books, some Canadian comic books. All right, so now hashtag stick around, the place where we make sure you stick through all our pimps. Let's talk about this real quick. We have two heroes called Captain Marvel. Two heroes. We have Shazam called Captain Marvel. We have Captain Marvel called Captain Marvel. Shazam had the name first. And then in the 70s, Marvel stole the name. They copyrighted the name when DC let it lapse. And DC sort of got the right to still keep using it since it was its original name. I don't know. What do you feel? What do you feel about this? I mean, I don't have any problem with. I actually think Carol being called Captain Marvel is a really cool name. But let's talk about the other Captain Marvel in our book club episode. Shazam or Captain Marvel? What's the better name?
I think Shazam is a much better name.
I do too.
For that character.
Same. I would agree. I also think because you need, or just again, I do not know much. I'm a Marvel girl. I don't know as much about DC, but I think just from what I've seen of the Shazam movie, you kind of need something quick and concise for him to do his transformation. And Shazam, it's Shazam. Like, it's perfect for that.
But whereas, let me, sorry, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. But I was going to say, like, but there is a problem with that. Okay. If he goes to the Justice League meeting and they're like, what's your name? And he goes, I'm Shazam.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So, Shazam, you really need to consult with Jason before you go to one of those. I mean, he's got your back.
What, 10 years old? Of course. No offense to our 10-year-old listeners. He's an idiot.
He would do it all the time. He would do it all the time.
I wish, though, I mean, first of all, if you've never read like the history of Marvel Comics, Marvel got up to some real shady shenanigans. And this is maybe one of the shadier of the shenanigans that they got up to. But I mean, that's the law. That's copyright law. They won. DC is lucky that they were allowed to use the name. I really wish, though, Warner Brothers had been like real dicks about it and made their movie called Captain Marvel.
Oh.
And we had 2 movies coming out called Captain Marvel. I just think it would have been, just to watch 2 corporate entities fight on that level would have been amazing.
Yeah, that would have been... Gosh. Oh, that would have been crazy. It's just such a weird world that we live in that like 2 Captain Marvel movies are in the same almost month.
Yeah, I think they're within 4 weeks of each other.
Right. Yeah. Bet you didn't see that hashtag stick around coming. All right.
I certainly didn't.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to Geek History Lesson. I am Jason Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And Professor Ashley, will you please close out the book club?
Class is now dismissed.